Hello and welcome to the Daily Neloo. Today I'm here with Liz Kelly, veteran regional sales manager. And Liz has a history of turning around underperforming teams. And you do that by taking a more of a holistic approach to management and leadership. So can you talk to us a little bit about what that means? What is your holistic approach?
My perspective is that when someone comes to work, they're working from 9 to 5 during the day, but they have a whole life before they show up and that they go home to. Usually a corporate approach is to just look at the person for what they are producing during the day at work, and the holistic approach is to look at the whole person. Mm-hmm. So when I acquire a team, I make it a priority to, before I do anything or roll out anything, I introduce myself to each team member one-on-one and have a one-on-one sort of information exchange, I guess you would say. I send them out information beforehand of what I'll be asking so that they're not surprised day of. They have time to think about their answers. And part of that is getting to know their home life too. If I, for my management positions, all of my representatives were spread out across the nation. So I would go to their hometown, and after our business day, I would invite their family to dinner.
What does that do?
So I think, number one, it showed care, right? That generally people's number one priority in life is not their job, it's their family.
Right.
And so, or even if it wasn't, someone didn't have a family, I went out to dinner with someone's roommate. That's who they're spending most of their time with outside of work. So I think it showed that I genuinely cared about them as a person. Mm-hmm. And it was the first foundation of building trust.
What else is included in this kind of holistic approach to management?
Well, once we establish that relationship of trust, which is, it's not immediate, you know, maybe they think I've met their family, but now I'm still going to be a dragon about the quota. And actually I never was. And each of the teams that I managed exceeded quota routinely. I think the reason for that is because instead of looking at the number that they were supposed to reach, I wanted to look at how they were or weren't reaching it from their mental state. Mm-hmm. And so after we established trust and a more, not personal relationship, because it didn't go outside the guidelines of HR, but a more understanding of a relationship that I really saw them as a person outside of work, the next step was to create the team culture. And the team culture was really based on two pillars: accountability and feedback. As far as accountability goes, everybody knows, especially in a sales organization, you have a quota and you're accountable to that quota. So if you miss it, you've missed your mark, and if you hit it, then you've done a good job. But there's so many steps leading up to hitting a quota that really demand your attention so that you can be successful. And so introducing the idea of being accountable to one's mistakes, to one's learning, creating that culture of ownership in each person via the corporate culture or the culture of our team. It wasn't necessarily the corporate culture of every corporation I worked for, but it was the culture of our specific team. And I started that by leading by example. So I would explain that I'd want that to be the culture of the team, and I would be accountable. If I fell short on something I told them to do, I would say that I missed the mark and apologize and recommit to a new deadline and then meet it. The feedback I got on the accountability was that it was a different approach than other managers had taken. Generally, their senior leadership wouldn't have the vulnerability to admit when they had made a mistake. And therefore then everyone on the team didn't want to make a mistake.
I've heard some leaders actually say like part of their leadership strategy is not to apologize because they don't want to like weaken their position. And what you're saying is directly opposite to that.
A culture takes time to manifest, and so they adopted that, and I would see little by little people that would come back and say, hey, I messed this up. Well, then they were used to getting guilt or punishment, right?
Shaming.
So I would say, awesome, you messed up. Like, what did you learn? That's great. And sort of by celebrating mistakes, it became easier to become accountable to both your wins and your losses. It really became an empowering experience for people who were generally told what to do. We're now seeing what to do intrinsically.
And then the other piece is this feedback loop, right? So let's talk a little bit about that.
Okay, so I really believe in feedback. On my one-on-one initial meetings, my intention was to have the person know that they were my only
priority
for the entire day and going forward, right? And so I modeled that in all types of behaviors, like not having any electronics out, not scheduling anything else during the day. So during that day, I explained that my goal for the team was to have it a feedback loop that went peer-to-peer, peer to leader, as opposed to just leader to direct report. My leader was in another state, only saw me at meetings, really didn't see me in my direct coaching or management decision-making on the team. And so they were really, my direct reports are really valuable to me in my personal growth and being the best leader for them possible. So during the one-on-one, I would roll out the idea that eventually, once they trusted me enough, I would hope that they would give me feedback because they were the best place for me to get it. And so it doesn't work right away. You know, there's not the initial, you say it and then it happens. Right, it wasn't like that, unfortunately. Well, the way I incorporated it into our culture was that once the first person trusted to give me any constructive feedback, I asked them if I could share it on a team call.
And when you do that, you're normalizing the feedback process, right? You're making it part of your week,
right?
By sharing it.
Part of our interactions,
yeah.
Yes. And so once we establish that they can give feedback to a superior, that gives them also their raises and their reviews and special projects, and once they could see that that doesn't reflect poorly and there's trust there, then I incorporated feedback, peer-to-peer feedback. There's a huge benefit there for the manager not to get involved, but to coach one direct report or two on conflict resolution, and part of that being honest feedback. I'm very clear on explaining that feedback, I believe, is a gift and also is optional to take. So, so at any time, the response to feedback is not to defend, deflect, or explain yourself why. The first answer is thank you. Thank you so much for giving me that feedback.
Because it's a gift.
Because it's a gift, and because it takes courage to be honest with someone, especially your boss.
Is this a layered approach that you would implement? Like build the trust first and then bring on the accountability and then the 360 feedback? Or do you kind of go about it all at once?
I think it's harder when it's not the corporate culture. Because I had to introduce it to a smaller team that was part of a bigger corporation that didn't necessarily carry the same values and expectations, I had to do it in layers. If you're lucky enough to work for a corporation that's doing it from the top down, then you could do it all at once.
But it's good to know that that doesn't have to be the case.
Right.
That you can actually build that culture within your team.
Yes.
At the least. There's not a lot of investment sometimes in management training. I think in a lot of companies, the people who do the groundwork, they do a really good job, and then they'll get promoted into management of people, but they're not trained to do so. And I think these like actual real life tools can help someone if they're in that situation.
Certainly.
Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, guys, that's all we have time for today, and I'll see you tomorrow.